All right, welcome to day two of how to grow your business from the big stage. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, my name is Dr. MJ McConnor, and I am a national speaker, and I am also the founder of Inclusive Excellence Consulting, which is a full service diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee. So the beauty of what I do as a founder and speaker is I get to work with organizations all across the nation. And I actually do talk about a variety of topics. However, there are some very specific topics that I have become known for. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But just to do a quick recap, for those of you who weren't able to join us yesterday. So yesterday we talked about the why. And for a lot of people, when they think about marketing and branding and how to establish themselves as a credible thought leader, they don't always think about speaking engagements as being one of the ways to position themselves as a thought leader in their fields. And so I had quite a few folks reach out to me over the past several months asking, like, how are you booking so many speaking engagements? Because I do have, like I mentioned before, I had the opportunity to speak across the nation. And so I said, sure, I will go ahead and release some content on how to book speaking engagements. Another thing I mentioned yesterday is that I fully recognize that for a lot of people, the idea of speaking can be incredibly intimidating. And there's a reason why it's one of the number one fears for most folks, right? For some people, the idea of speaking is more scary than spiders or snakes and some of the other different common phobias. But I will say that there are strategies to overcome that fear. And I'll talk about that a little bit later this week. There are strategies to overcome the fear and anxiety because oftentimes the body doesn't know the difference between nerves and excitement. And if you can channel that and almost kind of psych yourself out and tell your mind, like, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. I'm so excited for this opportunity. That's really one of the first steps to getting on stage, right? To getting there without allowing that debilitating fear to overwhelm you to the point where you don't even go on stage or want to do it. So there are some different techniques that a lot of speakers use, and that's one of them that I use in particular because we all get nervous, we all experience anxiety, and that's a natural part of the process. It's just making sure you don't allow it to derail your speech, right? That you still deliver and that you do well, because ultimately we want to do well as speakers and we want to be able to deliver a powerful, meaningful, and impactful speech where folks walk away feeling like they learned something new or they feel a sense of, wow, this was incredible. I got a lot out of this. That's right, my buddy, Dr. Dar, I see you in the chat. Do it afraid. Sometimes you just have to do it afraid. And the thing about doing it afraid is with time, the more you do it, you don't feel that sense of fear. It does become better with time. So it's just like anything. If you think about a professional athlete, think about all of the time that they have to put in terms of practice. So when it does come down to that 3-second buzzer beater, they can make the shot. Or when it comes down to the final minutes of a game, they're able to score and do well. There we go. I see. Hey, Miss Carolyn, how are you doing? Do it afraid. Yep, Joyce Myers. So sometimes you do have to do it afraid. So this is what I want to talk about today. Because yesterday we talked about the why. Why should entrepreneurs and business owners in particular consider adding speaking to one of like as far as why they should add it to the list of things in terms of how to generate revenue, right? Because oftentimes as business owners, and we talked about this yesterday too, oftentimes there's these ebbs and flows. It's like this constant up and down. Like one month it's like, ooh, feast. And then next month it could be famine. And so to avoid that, you have to think about different ways to generate revenue in your business. And one of the ways to do that is through speaking. So we talked about the why. It builds credibility. You can establish yourself as a thought leader. You're building a brand presence. There's so many benefits to it. And on top of that, you get paid for speaking engagements, right? And there are different non-paid speaking engagements, but I'm talking specifically about the opportunities that are paid. So it's a win-win. It's a win for the organization that brought you in to do the speech, and it's also helping you promote your brand and bring in revenue as well. So today I want to talk about what's the topic, right? And so I know that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people say, like, well, I guess I could try speaking, but what would I even talk about? And so I have 7 different points here that I want to address to help you hone in on a topic or topics. Number one is you need to start by identifying your expertise. Now, my expertise is in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've done a lot of work in the higher education sector. My expertise is being an educator, a facilitator, a trainer. That's what I'm really good at. So if I see something, an opportunity that says we're looking for an astronaut who works at NASA to come talk about how life is in space, I know that that's not for me, right? And anybody um, who understands the importance of being experienced and having expertise and something knows that if you don't know what you're talking about, people will pick up on that really quickly. Like, wait a minute, she's not really an astronaut. She doesn't know what she's talking about, right? So it's really important for you to identify, okay, what am I good at? What do I have experience in? What can I talk about? A few ways to do that too is think about some challenges you've overcome or some lessons you've learned or even some different approaches you've taken. So expertise can show up in a lot of different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to just be, I've worked in this particular area for a long time and now I'm talking about it. It can also be through lived experiences. Some of the best speakers I know personally, they don't necessarily have a ton of work experience in a specific field, or they don't have a lot of degrees and all of that, but they have shared something that's deeply personal and really relatable about something they had to live through and overcome. So I'll give an example of how I was able to figure out one of my key topics that I talk about quite a bit all over the country, and I talk about neurodiversity. Now, as an educator, of course, I could go on stage and say, okay, these are some of the ways to be more inclusive for folks who are neurodiverse. But I am also neurodiverse myself. So I do have dyslexia, and I talk about that quite a bit. And what I have found is that for a lot of people, they don't necessarily just want to hear straight up facts. Even though, yes, a lot of the sessions and things that I'm facilitating are educational in nature, but they do want it to be more personalized. They want it to be humanized. And that's something we talked about yesterday. So I'm able to share some of the different things that I experienced during my adolescence, during my childhood, and how I was able to become better at reading because I have that personal experience to speak from. So I can speak from it from the perspective of educator, researcher, and this is something I actually went through as a child, as an adolescent, and even as an adult. So that's just one example of how you can really lean into your expertise, whether it's something that you learned in school, or it is something that you have expertise in as a result of being in a particular field, or something you've just experienced personally. Number two, understand your audience's needs. A lot of times, and I see this happen, is that sometimes we don't really think about researching in advance or understanding, well, what do people want to hear? And that's the perfect opportunity to really do some market research and look up some common things that are discussed, maybe within that fall within your expertise, and maybe even some things that aren't discussed as much. So, and the beauty of that is you can really position yourself as a thought leader and an expert by leaning into some of those areas that we don't hear about as much. Now, the thing about it, and I will say I've experienced this firsthand, is that for some folks in the beginning, they might be like, well, we don't know if we really want to bring in a speaker to speak on that. We're not as familiar with it. However, there are other organizations that are like, well, that's different. We haven't heard of that before. Come talk about that. So, I mean, for some organizations, they may feel like, oh, it's not as common. We don't hear about this topic as much. While other organizations view it as, oh, excellent. This is a chance for us to really learn something new from this particular speaker because this isn't a topic we hear every day. So that's why it's really important. Number three, brainstorm topic ideas. You can create a long list. It might be 50 different topics, like all these different things you're passionate about. As I mentioned before, I love talking about neurodiversity. I'm a DEI practitioner, so it's a lot of different areas within DEI I enjoy talking about. I enjoy talking about how to create inclusive and equitable cultures and how to foster environments that are welcoming and accepting and, different things that fall within that. But as you brainstorm your topics, that goes to point number four that I have. It's important to make sure you validate those topics. And that goes back to assessing market demand. So, yep, and I see Wilson Consulting, Memphis, knowing the audience is crucial. Absolutely. So when you think about validating those topics, I'll tell you all something that I did. And it not only validated the topic, but it let me know that I was not alone in some of my struggles. So if you go to my main LinkedIn page, and if you looked at that featured section, I did a post earlier this year. It was like maybe 7, 8 months ago now. And I talked about my experience of just being a neurodivergent woman in the workforce and a member of the hard of hearing community, and how sometimes I was like, I'm not checking the accommodations box because I feel like that can be a barrier sometimes to getting a job or getting an interview. And so I did this deeply personal post and talked about my experience. And then I also included information about how prevalent this is, not just for me, but for other members of the neurodiverse and disability community. That post got more likes and reshares than any other post I ever had. And that validated for me, like, okay, this is something that people actually do care about. They do care about disability inclusion. They do care about learning more about neurodiversity. So now that I know that there is demand there, then this is something that I could talk about. This is one of the topics. And so that goes to my fifth point, because you can come up with all the different topics, but at some point you do have to narrow it down. And I, I laugh because I know a lot of times we don't want to necessarily box ourselves in. We're really afraid of, oh, I don't want to be seen as just the person who talks about this particular topic. I don't only want to be known for this one thing. But it's really important that you be seen as a thought leader in something specific. So, yes, there are people out there who know a lot about a lot, but there are also people who have really mastered the art of being known as, oh, this is the go-to person for this. And I say that knowing that it can be hard at first to kind of figure out, well, what is my go-to? What am I known for? And I see my girl Robin in the chat, Wilson Consulting, but one of the things she's known for is she helps people maximize LinkedIn. She helps you figure out how you can really profit and build a presence on LinkedIn and gain new clients and grow your following. That's her thing. And then Dr. Mayweather, I see you in the comments. So true about not wanting to be boxed in, but we have to do it to be a go-to person for something. Exactly. So what I tell people is build out a list of topics that you feel comfortable talking about, and then maybe pick your top three. And I know it's hard if you have a list of 25 topics, you're like, but I can talk about all of this. Yes, you probably can. And you will be able to talk about some of those other topics probably at some point, but start with the ones that you really want to build your brand around, or really want to be known for, or you feel like you can really, really grow your presence. Start there. So number 6, I have test topics and gather feedback. So when you do figure out the topics that you want to focus on as a speaker, it's really important to get feedback from your audience. And so, starting out, you may have an audience of maybe 15 people, 20 people. Use that as an opportunity to get their feedback at the end and say, I have this QR code here. I'd love for you to scan that and fill out this quick 2-minute assessment and let me know what you think about this topic. Or if you want to do paper surveys, you can do it that way. But make sure you're capturing feedback in some form or fashion so that way you can make modifications to your presentations and speeches if necessary. And that's really important too. And if you think about any field, it doesn't have to just be speakers. But if you think about even just as a business owner, you're constantly looking for customer feedback. You want customer testimonials, reviews, because you know that that's going to help increase credibility for you. And so if you can show people, yes, I've had different audiences listen to this particular presentation. Here's some of the feedback I got from the audience. Then a person is more likely to hire you. They're more likely to say, well, you know what? Yeah, okay. Based on that, it seems like the audience really loved your speech and your content. We want to hire you as our keynote speaker. Boom, just like that. So you have to have some way that you're assessing and constantly revising and improving. So getting feedback is really important. And then my last one is develop a speaker brand. That I know it can be a little daunting for some people because they're like, well, I've never had to really think about branding myself. What does that mean? And I talked about this a little bit yesterday. When you develop a speaker brand and a speaker style, you're known for something in particular, usually. So my approach tends to be very educational. I'm known as like the educator. Oh, she's gonna come in, she's gonna teach us some stuff, right? I'm not necessarily gonna deliver a whole lot of jokes, but I incorporate a little jokes here and there. But you have motivational speakers who are known for leaving audiences feeling inspired, for example. That is a part of their brand. You have speakers who are known for leaving audiences, I guess, even feeling like, well, gosh, I want to learn more, where they're helping them tap into a part of their thinking where it's making them question, like, okay, well, maybe I need to learn more about this topic after that. And I've seen a few TED Talk prisoners do that. And I was like, I like this style. I'm going to figure out how to do that. But no matter what you decide in terms of how you want your brand to be, you have to think about your brand too and your voice and how you want to present yourself. I'm going to use a quick example before we wrap up for today. Steve Jobs. Now, Steve Jobs, many people know him. He's a former CEO of Apple. And if you look at some of his old speeches compared to his later speeches, it's like night and day. And Steve, you can tell he's introverted and he's not necessarily somebody who probably loves speaking, but he had to learn to develop that muscle over time. And it's funny because when you watch some of his later presentations, like when they present the new iPhone, he's in his black turtleneck, he's got his jeans and his New Balances on, but you would think a rock star was coming on stage because he built up that persona. And he'd be like, ladies and gentlemen, here is the new iPhone. And people are cheering and clapping like Beyonce is on stage. It's like, wow. And not very many tech CEOs can pull that off. I have yet to see any other tech CEO in particular in that field to be able to pull off having this kind of dynamic persona. But he built that up over time. And he built up that brand. Even think about what he wore. He wore the same thing every time. A black turtleneck, jeans, and New Balances. That was all by design. That was a part of his brand. So that's why it's important too, as you think about what you want to be known for, what you want to talk about. Think about your brand too. And think about your delivery, your style. All of that matters. So that is my tip for today. Tomorrow we're going to meet again, same time, 12:30 p.m. Central, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. I have enjoyed every moment of this, and I'm hoping people are building up some courage to get on the big stage and to consider speaking engagements as a way to grow your presence your brand, and your business. So until next time, I will see you all tomorrow.